Okay, so.
Okay, Emma Fox, the reading is Change from Within. Man is a mental being, and to know this is the first step on the road to freedom and prosperity. For as long as you believe yourself to be primarily physical, a superior kind of animal, you will remain in bondage. In bondage, that is to say, to your own habits of thought, for there is no other bondage. Since you are a mental being, you will see how foolish it is for you to endeavor to improve your conditions by altering your environment while leaving your mind unchanged. To attempt this is to foredoom yourself to disappointment. Mind is cause and experience is effect. If you do not like the experience or effect that you are getting, the obvious remedy is to alter the cause, and then the effect will naturally alter too. There's a short scripture from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 23, verse 26. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also.
And the Lamsa translation, and I'm going one verse earlier to give a little more background. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of extortion and iniquity. Now we come to verse 26. Blind Pharisees, clean first the inside of the cup and the dish, so their outside may also be clean. Which is perhaps a good entry to where I want to go. When I was reading up for last week's talk about the Sufis and the whirling dervishes, I came across a reference point that defined the spiritual journey as 4 parts. And it starts with ignorance, then believing, then understanding, and then knowing. And that gave me pause. And obviously I decided it was worth thinking about some more and maybe talking about, and that's why we're here. It fit in with something that George Fox, one of the founders of Quakerism, used to say, this I know by experience. But his definition of experience was by the experience of the divine showing me or teaching me. Now, in my walk all these years, if I've been trying to give information, particularly of a spiritual nature, to someone, I've always sort of parsed it out before I told them what my data was. I could say, I don't know about this, but this is what other people believe. I believe this to be true. I understand this to be true. And this, the divine has shown me, so I know it is true. But how do you get to knowing? And as I was preparing for this talk, I found someone who actually defines different kinds of knowing, which I'd not given thought to. So I'm going to run through that, then get into the process by which you can move, shall we say, up the ladder. So they define expansive knowing, where you identify these opportunities or the moments that you enter in a state of elation or feeling enmeshed in divine love or feeling utterly transcendent. There is guided knowing, And this is when recognizing, spotting, when you're given flashes of insight or intuitive glimpses or calls to action. And then and this is like hits of information, hits of understanding. Then there is active knowing, which is when you are, shall we say, moving out into the world, making choices, acting with a conviction based on your inner knowing, your inner guidance, even when the choices you're making may seem to contradict external logic or the logic and situation of this world. And think Mother Teresa, who hopped on a train to India because of a calling, or Brother Mandis, for that matter, of the World Healing, what do they call it now? Not Crusade, World Healing Center, who all he knew was that he was supposed to give up his day job and move to Blackpool, and that there was something he was to do for God, and it had to be in Blackpool. That is definitely trusting your intuition, trusting the internal guidance against external logic. And then finally, there's what they call faith-filled knowing, where you've reached a state in your spiritual walk where the spiritual laws have become undeniable to you. You experience it internally, you experience it in the miracles that happen around you, in the synchronicities that help you move forward in life or occur around you that defy all statistics or statistical probability. So we can be going through each of these four at different, at the same time, but for different things, a different piece of it. Because our moving forward spiritually is not one big ocean liner plowing through the waters of the earth plane. We're more like pieces of driftwood, many pieces that are all us, each piece moving forward at its own pace. There's a nice definition I came across. Spiritual knowing is a gradual personal journey requiring humility, patience, and the intentional effort to connect with a higher power or inner wisdom that is often facilitated by studying spiritual texts, by studying nature, and by being in service. And it's also defined as a process of moving beyond conceptual understanding to a direct embodied experience of the truth, which is George Fox. This I know by experience. Something that you too, I would guess, since all of us here are long-term spiritual walkers, I think if you look at your own paths, there are places where you already know by experience. And there are probably many paths where you're still exploring, shall we say, or struggling, or something like that. So, assuming your goal is to move up the ladder, become more spiritually knowing, living a spiritually knowing life, what are some core practices you can do to facilitate your movement along this path? From several different sources, the first thing mentioned was observe stillness and meditation. And subset of that, observe it regularly. Certainly Father Rohr encourages all to regularly be quiet with God. For the Hicksite Quakers, the type that I come from, silence is not only what meeting is all about, but what we are encouraged to exist within, so that we can hear what they call the still small voice within, or the little nudge that gives you wisdom, gives you a direction of where to turn, where to travel, what to do next. And the more you practice your quiet, the easier it is to be able to identify the difference between this thought and this thought. You are also encouraged to listen to your intuition, which I don't know if we call that the still small voice, but it is the input from outside ourselves that does not come with words, does not, well, I suppose it might, but it does not come from outside words, let's put it that way. Again, silence is so important so that you can get those nudges. It's really hard when you're listening to the Beatles or a hip-hop band, driving in the car singing along, to feel a nudge. Or at least it is for me. Maybe you're different. The more you can open and be open to, and this is something Sufis talk about too, to the ongoing openness of connection with this great divine that is us and that is all around us, but that we can so easily drown out in our own mind, in our own thoughts, in our own actions, without even intending to. So the third item from this compilation is do cultivate daily practice, daily prayer, and I will do a talk about how to pray sometimes, since a lot of people misunderstand. Study of written wisdom, contemplation, just being quiet in the divine, anything like that. Then maintain a mindful presence. And I think this is where Brother Lawrence comes in, where he speaks about, being in the spirit, draw water, chop wood. Praying, draw water, chop wood. Whatever you're doing in the world, the more you can still maintain this connection with the great divine that we all are. And reference Leah's talk of a week or two ago. Let it be easy. You don't need to struggle or force to let this divine connection, which is ours automatically, because we are God and we are of God. But again, it's so easy to get distracted or to forget, because this is a will of the wisp. The harder we try to make it something concrete, the farther we are from the connection with the divine. So, in your daily walk, that what the Sufis think of as unceasing prayer, but so different from the unceasing prayer of the Orthodox, where you're supposed to have words continually going around in your mind. Then they recommend practicing gratitude, because it helps open your heart, it heightens your spiritual awareness. And there's the sidebar advantage, according to my late sister, that the more gratitude you express, the larger becomes the pipeline through which the divine can connect with you and can deliver more wonderful good for you. embrace self-reflection. If you look about the world, you see so few people who are truly aware of their internal workings. Here's a prescription to help you in your move from ignorance to belief, to understanding, to knowing. By knowing your internal self, by being, shall we say, courageous and clear-sighted about that which is more representative of the great divine and great divine love, and those parts of us which are less representative, lower on the frequency scale, if we're looking at the Hawkins reference. If we look at ourselves unflinchingly, that doesn't mean we need to beat ourselves up, but it is okay to recognize where we have shortcomings, where we are falling short of our goal to be as representative of the divine as possible. Even Gandhi had that. Those who knew him well, he preached never getting angry, ahimsa, nonviolence. But those who knew him well said that if you were in a meeting and part of his, we'll call it a shtick, was he always just wore the barest of clothing, and at least during one part of his campaign to free India, he would carry around a spinning wheel, and he would spin yarn, thread, for weaving more cloth, because India was at one point forbidden to weave their own clothing. They had to buy it from Britain. Well, this person wrote, if you watched and someone in the gathering around him said something that made him upset, the thread would break. That's how you knew he wasn't happy about what just happened. And then he'd have to retie it and carry him, but he never admitted it in public. Maintain a state of humility and teachability. How many of us have been proud enough at one point or another to ignore or attempt to refute or disregard a teaching that we've been offered? I shudder at some of the times in my life, which is a good time to practice self-forgiveness, folks. I'm still not really good at it myself. But the more you're able to maintain an openness to the lessons of the divine, of this world, it's sort of an, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn and understand more, the more easier it is to receive the insights that we are offered, as opposed to the stiff-necked Pharisees. And the Pharisees, of course, were at that point the religious leaders and also the socially and politically powerful. Look at how many Pharisees we have around us. It's so easy to become cocksure, to become arrogant, to assume you know. But that isn't the way to move forward up this ladder toward true knowing in the divine sense. And then finally, live the truth as you understand it. As you walk through life, live the spiritual principles that you now know or that you have come to understand. Doing the work that the principles call for, representing compassion, being in service, transforming the abstract that we now understand into the positive that brings more good to this benighted planet. I've referenced before, and I'll mention it again, that several times I've come across atheists where in our conversation they've explained their ethical guide point. That when my time comes, that I'm no longer here, may the world be better for my having passed through. And I think this is a good question to carry with you in all the choices that you walk through life. Will this action, this set of words, this look, this smile, leave the world a better place because I was there? I think it's also a great way to maintain your humility. To always be aware that what you do can have a positive or a not so positive result. Ages and ages ago, when Sister Pepper was alive and still had her church, I remember her, and when she did her readings, she came to me and said, there is a person who's going to come to you feeling troubled. Be very careful what you say to them, she said, because I will easily misunderstand you and it could end up for the worse. I had several people come to me. I don't know which one it was. I did my best. I don't know the results. But I carry that admonition with me, ideally every minute of every day, so that may I never, ever, even in a lighthearted moment, say or do something that could cause pain or injury to another. And that's worth thinking about in your own life. Is there a way you can carry that metric around as a constant reminder, if you will? Okay, so what can get into our way in terms of moving along this path toward spiritual knowing? Well, I've certainly run into people for whom, if it doesn't fit my rational belief and all the scientific words, then it can't be. Here they call it intellectualism. You can keep yourself distracted with noise. The number of wedding couples who call me who have their television or their radio or something on so loud in the background, there are times I have to ask them to turn it down or turn it off because I can't track. Well, if they have it on all the time, and I've been in environments where someone had it on all the time, how are you going to hear that still small voice? How are you going to hear your own consciousness or conscience when you're busy distracting? And there are other ways too. Drinking liquor, gambling, worrying about the job, overworking. So many ways to keep yourself away from that quietness, that sense of peace that is the divine right of each of us to have. And then, of course, there's our own ego, which can get in the way so easily. It'll try judging, it'll dismiss the spiritual experiences because it's invariant with what it wants. There's in transactional analysis, they identified a decision that every 2-year-old is supposed to make. Many don't. but at least a trouble for the rest of us. The 2-year-old comes from 1-year-old in the developmental stage with the belief, I want what I wanted, and nobody can tell me I can't have it. And that's ego. The ideal is that your caregivers in the world enable you to change during your 2-year-old developmental period to, I'll do what I'm supposed to do that supports the good of everyone. Now, there's a potential risk there because I had, when I was talking about this with one person, in other words, I'm supposed to conform? No, that isn't necessarily the good for everyone. Those who stand up and raise ethical questions make people uncomfortable, but they're still working for the higher good of everyone. Gandhi, with the turmoil he brought to his nation and to the British, he was working to what he understood was the good of everyone. Those in this country who fought against, argued against, preached against slavery made a lot of people unhappy. But they were standing on the principle, the spiritual principle of God's love and working for the good of everyone. So that comes to some Rumi poems. One of them was, I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. And a Rumi scholar wrote, and I forgot to write the name of the person, only you alone can realize God's existence in yourself. And it can only happen, or it can happen only now. If you will think it will happen in the future, it will never happen. So part of this is being in the now and living in the joy and the existence of this divine that we are in and of and representative of. Sufis also believe that all things in the universe are simply they call it a presentation of God, a piece of God's existence. And they say that the way you search for God is through meditation. And so that leads us back to the founding principle of the set of steps for building your spiritual path toward utter and complete knowing and being in the knowing. When we enable ourselves through practice, through desire, through request for assistance from all that is, so that we can become this silence, live this silence, even in the midst of our day-to-day hauling water, chopping wood. Our soul and the divine that is our soul will show us understanding and help us to gain the true wisdom and peace and love that is knowing. And that is what will rise to the surface as we haul water, chop wood, live in silence. And I fear that's a partly baked idea, my friends, but that's where I am today. So, anyone with comment, suggestion? Yes.
Just one other thought that has surfaced for me, and it was listening to one of the talks from one of the Buddhist monks. Christy, thank you for sending those links to me. One thing he said is to stop multitasking. And that really kind of got me, because the idea is when we're trying to do multiple things at once, we're scattered. And so it's something I keep thinking of, and I think it takes us away from being in the moment and being centered.
Thank you. Somebody else with a contribution? Yes, Ellie. And then we'll come to Liz.
You were going over the 4 steps of spirituality. Well, that's what I titled it. And I was trying to figure out why it sounded so familiar. In Judaism, they have something similar. It's called parties. Heshet. It's the levels of Jewish learning or interpretation, which you could say it's the steps of spirituality. Heshet is the literal or direct, simple, contextual meaning. So it's a very simple, basic meaning. The remiz is the hint, the implied symbolic meaning. Daresh, inquiry. Comparative, interpretive, where we get the word midrash from. And then sod, secret, hidden, esoteric, Kabbalistic meaning. So when you were saying that, I was like, why is it, going, why is it here, But, and then one thing, when you were talking about, what can get in our way, and as, Phyllis brought up, multitasking. I read something earlier today, but I won't read the whole thing. But one of the things that it was talking about was an uncontrolled mind. When your thoughts are scattered, when you don't have direct thought, when your energy is being drained. Well, why? Because of your uncontrolled mind. You're not controlling your mind to being able to think clearly. And it can be, not being uncontrolled as I have to control it, I have to keep control of it, but all the various things we think about. I have to get the kitchen done. I have to do this chore. I have to do that chore. I have to make this phone call. I have to make sure this is done before the appointment tomorrow. So all those things we have to do, but those things are draining because it's not being controlled. Oh, what if I did these 3 things and then took a rest and then did the next 3 things? So we're not putting that strain on our mind and our body. Anyway, I've had to take lessons in that over the past month because of anything happening here. I've literally had to, say no very loudly, out loud, a hard stop, no. Because if you say it softly on the inside, sometimes you don't hear it. And so I would say that, and I would literally stop and going, okay, what am I doing to reset my system? And it's been hard for me to do, like Phyllis, the multitasking, being able to stop that when it's something you're used to doing, how do you operate without doing it? And you were talking about experience in in the different things of knowing, or the four steps of spirituality, ignorance, believing, understanding, and knowing. And in the Hebrew thought, knowing is experience. There's a scripture that says, and it's Yahweh talking, or the divine talking. My people perish for lack of knowledge. That word knowledge, when you break it down and do the word study, actually means experience. So my people perish for lack of experience.
Mhm.
So you really can't have experience and the knowledge separate. They go hand in hand. And as you were saying about being able to live, to walk what you talk. There's a set of, going back to scripture again, there's a set of scriptures that Shaul or Paul had mentioned, about the non-believer. If they're a Torah or instruction into themselves, they're still an instruction into themselves, even if they don't believe what the scriptures say, because it's that moral standard that you were talking about. They have that standard that which they live by, that belief system which they live by. And sometimes, that atheist or that pagan has a better understanding of that than a Christian does. And I've seen that, I don't know, in the last 6 months, and that kind of blew me away. In the fact that, Christians will tell you what's in their book, but many of them don't know how to live what's in that book. Not all, but many. But then you have those that don't necessarily believe what's in the book, pagans and heathens, but they will treat you better. They have a better understanding of what's in that book, even though they don't know what's in it, than the ones that try to tell you what's in it. And I'm sure you've run into that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So
Thank you very
you,
much.
Maureen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Liz, you're on next. Let me unmute
No,
you.
that's Lori. Okay.
Okay.
She's Zoom user.
Okay. Okay, you should be on. We should be able to hear you, Liz.
Okay, thank you. That talk was very good, Brian. I really enjoyed hearing it and the perspective. It was a great reminder that I did exactly what has already been said here tonight, and that is to stay too busy running from one thing to another. I thought when I got quiet that I was quiet, but I wasn't, because my mind was racing what I had just completed. So, very much to the point and very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Christy.
I appreciate what everyone's had to say, and thank you, Brian. That was very succinct. I recognize the mind, or calling it mindfulness, which the monks have done a lot for me as far as mindfulness, and it would be the slowing down, or I can't even find the words around it at this point, other than it's been quite an experience to listen. And now we have the videos that we can, they're excerpts from the videos that are being put before us by many different channels of the different monks. But the thing that I'd like to speak to is realizing that there was another thing that came up that I had seen, that we could shortcut, whether you want to call it the vagus nerve or bring yourself back to ground. And that was to speak to yourself in third person. So if I'm really not on task and I've lost my mind and I can't stay straight into any schedule, or I'm all over the house because I moved from one room and then I go, oh, there's that. And then I'm taking it. It's a real ADDer. So the thing that brings back to the grounding would be to talk to myself in third person. Christy, you've got this. It's okay. It's okay to do what you're doing. Or Christy, it's repeating your name. That was the point of it. Your name will sharply move into another place in your being. You can play with it, try it, speak to yourself in that way, that you are that witness to the person that you are, and you're speaking to you in your name. And I haven't played with it a whole lot, but since I saw it, I thought it's interesting. People are coming out of the woodwork to help you or us or me to fine tune what my how do I want it? My attention span. I'd like to speak to something just very quickly, because I did the deed of listening to a video that I trusted from a website because of the information that usually comes from that website that I enjoy. But he showed a video of a victim, and the victim, obviously, many things are altered these days, but you could tell that the video had not been played with that much, because she was truly in character with her painful body. And the things that she spoke were too descriptive for what my brain could do. As many people, we can't do that. We can't be in that place when somebody is very descriptive about their pain body or the what's happened to them in any kind of a conflict, or from a child, actually 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, that they have that memory. When I was finished, I noticed that the rest of the day into the night, my feeling was to check the door, to feel something around me. There was impending doom that I couldn't get over. I had to do an exorcism on myself. And I'm going, that is really bizarre. I haven't felt that frightened or that weirded out for a very long time. I have felt it before in my life, but it was from watching something, because my imagination is very vivid. You can't tell me something without me creating the picture. The picture is there. I make the movie. So I'm speaking to that simply because of the impression of who we are. There's a movie that goes on constantly, and I look at myself as far as third dimension and how we are, what we are spirit-based. Where does this come from? But I will speak to that because it took me many hours to get through it. And as far as my own exorcism, cutting the cord and really doing a lot of work, it moved into the next day a little bit, but that day was horrendous into the evening for me. And I realized I invited something in because I wanted to know. And in that knowing, I didn't protect myself. So whatever we do, wherever we go, I think that may be the thing that I'm speaking to most. What is your prayer of protection, and where do you go with it, and how well do you understand it? Because you'll never know at any point in time what you've opened your field to. And I think that's kind of comes to the bottom line. And it's a reminder to me, because that's as precious and as important as you're, again, bringing yourself back to being present. Your field is needing to be also protected. So thank you.
Thank you. We thank God for having blessed us today with greater wisdom, with this community of sharing and caring and loving, with this community that shares in giving healing to one another, supporting one another in growth and healing. We thank the Divine for having brought us here, given us the technology so we could be together as a family, as a community. We thank the Divine for preparing our way as we depart from here for whatever it is we're supposed to do next, wherever it is we're supposed to go next, and for giving us the strength, the confidence, and the knowing to do what the Divine energy, the Divine plan has in mind. We thank the Divine for watching over us as we depart from here and guiding us back together again soon. We say this in the name of the one great love, and amen.